The panelists, let's describe who they are. Vivek, why don't you give us a moment of your time? Give us about 20 seconds.
This works. Thank you. Hi, I'm Vivek. I, by day, run the global e-commerce engineering for a sports brand in Zurich. It's also heard as QC. Some people say it's not QC, it's On. And it's a sports brand, and I run the e-commerce engineering. By night, I develop stuff, I builder, so I also coach and mentor people coming fresh to industry, but also new leaders. Thank you.
Okay. And we have two keynoters with us, because I reached high. So Claire, why don't you introduce yourself? Again, they know you, but go ahead.
Yep, so I'm Clare Sudberry. I'm a software engineer. I'm an independent technical coach. I teach and train and mentor. I taught a course for coding black females for a while. I ran the Made Tech Academy. I used to have a podcast. I'm just a bit of a loudmouth, basically.
And available, I hear, for hire. Eduardo.
Yeah, so Eduardo, I'm an academic turned startup founder, engineer, architect, and nowadays I basically do what I talked on my keynote. So helping organizations that build software to organize better, to acknowledge they need to continuously embrace change and many things around that. I'm also work closely with team topologies, so I do a lot of things around that too. And yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the panel. Thank you for coming. Let me introduce tonight's topic. I have a big picture behind you. This is from the Agile Manifesto itself. Earlier, this was set up as well in a different speech. We won't go to that right now. But the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams, a principle on the principles page of the Agile Manifesto. In Agile Meets Architecture, when they suggested that we have a panel, I thought, well, Agile architecture, that's this principle. How can you beat that? That has to be the obvious thing to do. But of course, the problem is it true? Was it aspirational? Was it meant to be thought-provoking? Did they really believe this? Is it provable? Well, tonight you get to be the judge. We'll open up with some definitions and some questions, and so the panel will help us decide, is it true or how true is it? So we need to define some terms. Team, self-organizing, best. As you know, in software, the word best means I like it better.
True story.
True story. And emerge, which are all interesting words in that sentence. So I'll throw a couple of definitions up. The first one is team. I would suggest that a team is two or more people who are independent, working together on a common mission and goal. Is that fair? Does the panel accept that definition?
I agree to that. I think I like the word interdependent. I have often in teams where people work independently. So I like that term, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, and the audience agrees that term is acceptable for the debate. It's not a debate. Self-organizing. In our case, it means that the team internally decides who does what, when, and how, as opposed to having assigned individual tasks. Panel? Okay?
Yeah.
Acceptable? Audience? Okay.
Okay-ish.
Okay-ish.
We should have one controversial point on the table, right?
Should. Okay, best. Most appropriate to the context of the mission, I would suggest, is the intended meaning of best. So in software, having the ability to deliver, operate, and adapt as necessary. Is this an acceptable definition?
I would throw learning there too.
I think that's worthwhile. Now I have to go edit the slides. Thanks a lot, Eduardo.
Sorry.
Okay with that. Okay, and audience, you're okay with that too? Good, okay.
Who's the judge of best?
What's that?
Who's the judge of best?
I guess it would have to be proven in experience, wouldn't it? So who was that said it today? That if that the agility, I'm going to think of who this is in a second. It's going to make me embarrassed. The agility is embodied in the code, not in the people. Can that code be changed? If so, it's probably agile. If it can't be easily changed and repurposed, it probably isn't. So I would say that we could use that as a judge is, when we actually use it, can we operate, deliver, and adapt? Is that, there's some really perfect architectures that if you change anything, it'll break everything. I think that would not be best, if that's okay.
I mean, sometimes the best definition of best, it depends.
Well, there you go. It depends on the context and the mission. So, emerge. Gradually arising, gradually coming to be, not decided a priori. Can I try that one more time? Wow. American tongue doesn't work. A priori and committed to irreversibly. So the idea that it emerges rather than being pre-planned in totality. Right? Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I was going to ask you what a priori mean, but you kind of implicitly told us.
Yeah, after not pronouncing, I could have just said in advance, and I could have pronounced it, and you'd understood it right away, so that would have been great. Okay, she understood. That was a question for you guys. So, quickly for the panel, what's your position? It's true, mostly false, absolute bollocks.
Absolute bollocks. I just wanted to say it.
It's fun to say it, isn't it?
It's fun to say.
Mostly true from my side, yeah.
Sorry, no, I didn't really mean that. Well, I didn't understand what the question is. What is the question that we're answering here?
Do the best architectures arise from self-organizing teams?
It depends.
Okay.
You got that up
Thank
there.
you.
Vivek? Okay.
Not an option.
And anything to add?
I mean, yeah, mostly true.
I'm going to say mostly.
Yeah,
mostly
Mostly
we
true.
are aligned on that.
Yeah.
One thing.
Okay, so I have some challenges to throw out to the panel because I want to make it hard. So the challenge I was given was that architecture cannot emerge. It has to be designed in from the beginning, or you always inevitably will end up with a big ball of mud. So why don't we start with Claire on this one? Any quick impulses?
I mean, absolute bollocks. It definitely can emerge. That doesn't mean to say that you can't do any upfront planning or that isn't beneficial. It's always good to think about things, and we will have opinions and we'll have useful context that we know about that will help to guide us, and people who are experienced will be able to offer useful suggestions as to what the way forward might be. But I think you're actually more likely to get a ball of mud if you do everything up front. Because the world changes. I mean, this is what we've been talking about all day, right? Agility is about being able to respond to change. And that's why it is better if architectures are allowed to emerge, because even as you're designing an architecture and as you're building an architecture, things will change. And also, building changes things. So you might design it, but then you have to build it. And while you're building, things will change. So allowing an architecture to emerge is, it's a bit like if you love somebody, set them free. Like, love your architecture, trust it, allow it to emerge.
Moving clockwise, Eduardo.
Yeah, I mostly agree with Claire, yeah. I think just to make a slight point, which is even if you have expert knowledge, if you are not experimenting with what you are doing, you shouldn't be architecting beforehand. So you really need to, basically to architect based on the knowledge that you are validating. So I think that's a very important point on this.
Do you have anything you'd like to glean that they've left behind?
Definitely. I think for me, I would say aspects of architecture. I think it was probably last year when Pat Kua talked about the notion of a garden. I like that framing a lot. I believe, from my experiences, I think there is an emergent behavior in architecture. However, I think like the genetic code, there are some aspects on really coming together and thinking about what are those hard decisions and how we want to approach thinking about hard decisions. I believe we could do that thinking up front, not the aspects concretely, but at least how we want to think about it. I think that's kind of founded in the self-organizing behavior of teams. So for me, I don't agree with the entire definition. I would almost say that architecture by nature has to be emergent. However, there needs to be conditions that have to be true for that emergent behavior that are decided but possibly by the self-organizing team.
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak again.
Okay, short one.
You see, coming back to what Eduardo was saying, that upfront thinking could be defining the terms of your experiments. That can be defining what it is you're trying to prove and having theories about what might be true rather than saying this will be true.
Very good. On the bird site, somebody said this is not true because no matter how you start, you'll end up with a big ball of mud. That wasn't Brian Foote, but it could well have been. So we'll move on to the next challenge. We think we've covered that one pretty well. Shiny objects. Left to their own, won't the teams just stack up all the technologies that fascinate them and make a mess of it? So let's see, last time we started with Claire, so this time we'll start with Eduardo.
I disagree with this one. I think this happens, but if we don't allow teams to explore, we will also lose opportunities of finding things that can really be a big differentiator on architecting. I have a good example of, we are nowadays talking a lot about platforms, and to me, platforms should be where you consolidate things that teams discover and teams find that they need, and multiple of teams are looking for that. And many times it starts because they decided, okay, maybe we should try this language because it may be make us more effective or help us solving this problem. However, yeah, sometimes we like shining objects, and maybe as organizations, if you all the teams start sharing knowledge with each other, this becomes like they naturally help each other on getting away from some of the shining objects. Okay. And this is a personal experience also, so yeah.
Vivek?
I agree Emmanuel, we agree on something. I think from my experience, I have been in an environment where it was complete autonomy in one time, and everybody discovered they were putting every language platform in production. I think what I see is we are hiring adults, and I think we are giving them autonomy, but also we trust them making the right decision and also thinking about how we want to make decision about adopting a shiny tech. So for me, I don't believe that making shiny objects or adopting shiny objects is a bad thing. I think letting people to decide and figure out that they take responsibility and also accountability of that decision, which means I want to test this new thing, but I also want to be responsible for operating it. Of course, you're an adult, you're mature, we trust you to make the right call, so I believe. That's my stand on that.
Okay, so one of my biggest concerns about self-organizing teams has always been that it can get out of control. And this is based partly because I used to work for a company in Manchester, which was on my hit list of companies I wanted to work for because I was quite closely involved with XP Manchester, who were a local meetup organised around extreme programming practices. And this company, I think I may as well say who they were, they don't exist anymore anyway, Late Rooms, was well known within the community because they did adopt so many good XP practices. They did TDD, they did pair programming, they had self-organising teams, which is not technically an XP thing, but it's allied. Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, it's definitely mostly connected. And so I got a job there, and it was like, yay! And I was there for about 18 months, and then they went bust. But the thing, it wasn't my fault. But the thing is that they were amazing in lots of ways, but these teams were kind of out of control. They were basically, we get to do whatever the hell we want because we're self-organizing. We get to make all our own choices. We choose all our own technologies. We're all highly kind of ambitious, intelligent, excited geeks. And we've all got our own favorite technologies. And we're self-organizing, right? So we can do whatever the hell we want. And each team had their different favorite technology, which didn't play well with the technologies being used by the other teams. And also, unfortunately, there is a natural tendency that humans have towards tribalism, and it did tend to be that these teams we're better than the others, and we know better than the others, and we don't want to do what they're doing, we want to do what we're doing, because they don't know what they're doing. Although I absolutely accept all of the great advice that Eduardo gave in his keynote this morning, that there definitely are ways of doing self-organizing teams that don't degrade in this way, but it brings with it a tendency towards that. And also because we like the new and the shiny, if we can just pick our own favorite new and shiny and nobody's going to stop us, then generally programmers will. And it's not always the best thing. And just as a final point, as a consultant for ThoughtWorks, one of the big problems that we often had, actually two-pronged. One was that we would go into clients who had just decided that, for instance, we want AI. What do you mean you want AI? What do you want it for? Don't know, we just want it because it's good, isn't it? Or, you know, we want to use a particular language that none of our engineers know, but we want to use it anyway because it's great. And we'd be like, whoa, hang on a minute. Is that a good choice for your circumstances? Does it fit what you are trying to do? Never mind whether it's new and shiny. Does it actually work for your context? So that, on the one hand, we'd have that. But also, we had our own consultants who are like, I'm working for ThoughtWorks. That means I get to do all the new and shiny, right? And they'd introduce it to, and you'll all have tales of ThoughtWorks engineers coming in and introducing something amazing and then leaving, and nobody could maintain it. So that's my little rant. I know that self-organizing teams don't have to end up like that, but they definitely can.
I'm going to grab a drink of water real quick while Vivek speaks.
Can I add a little?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll stand over here beside you while you talk.
Just building up on mentioning ThoughtWorks. So, for example, in the organization I talked in the morning, teams had the ability to propose new things, but then we would enter, for example, the tech radar idea. Like, okay, let's try to have some sanity checks on what we are bringing in. Because people, people go between teams, and it's good to have some base of, I don't know, mostly JVM, or I don't know. There are some things that start becoming, that all the teams start shaping. But I think my point to disagree is really the fact that if we say, no, this is not possible, then we end up, I think it's even worse, because no one is able to bring anything in. So you are just doing whatever someone said a few years back.
Yeah, take a second.
I think I see, and I think most of us think, I think we see programmers, developers more as problem solvers. So figuring out, even if a shiny tech works, just do it, learn from it. I think experimentation was mentioned. Some of the experience I had working in maybe mid-sized to a large tech organization was we went from many extremes. One was run anything, another everything. And then we realized that every team has to heavy lift operating that, and that led to naturalization, which is standardizing. So for me, I think the answer is not that people will just use shiny tech. I use shiny tech all the time. I figure out where is the right place to use shiny tech, what's the blast radius if I fail with that, and what's the impact on the customer because of it. I think coaching and kind of enabling those ideas and putting it in terms of the architecture principles kind of allows people to test our shiny tech without any problems.
Very good.
One more thing. If you allow devs to move between teams, that really helps. because
That's a good point.
they spread good ideas and they learn good ideas from each other, and you don't get the silos.
I'm a big believer in permeable team boundaries. Whenever I set up a group of teams or an organization, always, you can change teams with anybody else who wants to change, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Well, what if I change that? Well, they don't know the technology. Well, they can change to learn it, and that's okay, and to bring new ideas. Yeah. So I think I popped up this earlier slide because I think what we're talking about is that when they go off of the common mission, if they go off the goal, then they end up in the weeds. And we sort of defined a team as being on a common mission, but I don't think that we stated in there that it was the organization's mission, did we?
Yeah.
Oops.
Yes. Yes.
Would I be allowed to make a modification later?
It's an evolutionary definition.
That's right. It just keeps getting better as we go.
A pull request for this. Direct.
So there's an old joke that the camel is actually a racehorse designed by a committee. Have you heard this joke? So I thought that would be appropriate for the next example. So everybody says designed by committee is bad. So obviously a self-organized group of people working on architecture are going to fall into all of the terrible diseases that teams tend to have designed by committee. What are all the dysfunctions you were talking about? Oh, for instance, false consensus, groupthink. Let's see, I guess, Vivek, you start, because last time it was Eduardo. Do you have a quick thought?
Yeah, I think all good answers start with it depends. I think design by committee, especially if they are influenced by a lot of biases that goes inside that committee, can lead to maybe a lack of decision, lack of arriving at a conclusion. So for me, I start thinking in terms of principles and values. What are the principles and values does a committee, a group of people coming together, use to think about solving a problem, and what are those constraints? I think the lack of constraints, lack of having those principles and values, then creates the noise that the group gets influenced by biases. Maybe the loudest person in the room, the expert in that group, one of those people in the group as a leader. I'm there sitting in a group of people and it's my way or highway. But I think ultimately if we come up with what are those fundamental principles and values that we are using to decide, what are those constraints that we are optimizing for, and at what stage do we say we have to make a decision? And I think decision could be we cannot decide unless this has to be true. And I think for me that structure really gives ability for design by committee to work. Without that, it creates chaos.
Excellent. Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I presume the context is because we're a self-organizing team, therefore we're doing our own design, and so the design is by committee, and does that cause problems? And I think that groupthink is at its worst when the group has only one member. I think that actually many heads are better than one. The sum of the parts is greater than the individuals added up. Does that make sense? Something like that. And it's a good thing to have lots of people inputting into decisions. But what you have to do is think about whether what you're doing is being ratified against some kind of external needs. You know, are you aligned with the needs of the organization? And I think what's really important is what we talked about before, which is that you're defining some kind of parameters for experimentation. So you're saying, we believe that if we do this, it will be good because, and we will find out whether it is good by doing this. And, you know, I think that design by committee absolutely can work and is a really good idea. But, you know, nothing guarantees success. But it's definitely, like I said, many heads better than one.
Yeah. I keep on coming back to, so we say designing, but I always tend to use learn, design, and decide. So the learning part is about, does this make sense in the bigger picture of so our team fits in an organization? Does it make sense? And the learning part is about getting that. But so this committee, do they have, say, the maximum knowledge they could have to go for a decision? And you hear like some interesting ideas coming up on this. Andrew, also from ThoughtWorks, he has been talking and writing about this idea of advice process. So you are still a committee driving things, but are you involving the people that know about this in the organization so they can give you some ideas? Do you involve the people that will suffer from whatever you are doing? So there are a lot of those things that, if they are coming into place, for me, this is a perfectly reasonable, for me, it's probably the best way of approaching designing. Yeah.
Can I add something? Two things, small things. The first one is, I presume you meant Andrew Harmel-Law, and I wanted to get his surname in because he's great. Look him up. Yeah. The other thing that I meant to say before was bias to action. Do something. Don't sit around. I mean, like, groupthink, it probably is more likely if you just sit around talking about things. Like, you know, designs are provable when you actually do something. So have a bias to action. Have an idea and then try it out.
Can I just add last thing? I can also give an example where maybe design by committee did not work, and maybe it looks like the decision was taken or the design was taken by one person, but actually behind the scene it was decision or designed by committee. So I don't know how many of you are aware of it. At Apple, there's a concept called directly responsible individual. So a single person who makes a decision about the design. I think Tesla uses that a bit. In Germany, some companies, larger tech companies, tried out that model. I was part of that adventure. I think even in that context, I have heard, and my peers and people I work with who have been experienced to that, through those companies, it was asked for that person that you are accountable and responsible for the design decision. However, have you spoken to these people? Have you reached out to the right team? So I remember reading about it in Creative Selection book. I think Ken, who wrote the book about the Apple keyboard. And I think he talks about design decision taken by one person, but basically seeking inputs from a lot of people, but it's you're putting your neck on the line, you're accountable for that. So I think there's also an element of design by committee, which may not look like that at the surface level, especially in other companies who are doing it. But I think it's still kind of taking the advantage of talking to people, listening to everyone who is directly or indirectly responsible or relevant to that problem space.
So design with advisors, perhaps. I wanted to throw this out real quick. I know I'm the moderator. I'm not supposed to have my own ideas. But I teach a lot of team programming, ensemble programming, and people say, well, you're going to have groupthink. And groupthink is defined as being a dysfunction where the field of options is narrowed down due to a pressure to conform to an individual's. And I found that mob programming, pair programming, ensemble groups like this, we tend to celebrate the person who came up with a thing we didn't think of. And so the pressure isn't to conform, but to bring divergent ideas in. And then we tend not to have groupthink because we're celebrating the opposite. I thought I'd share that just to get that out of the way. We are down to something that we refer to as the dreaded speed round, part 1. So as I switch over, each of you, beginning with Clare, will have 2 minutes to sum up. And then after that, it'll be 1 minute for the next one. So you ready?
What am I summing up?
Ready?
No, I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Yes, I'm going to pop up the next question.
Oh, there's going
you
to be a
have
question.
2 minutes.
Good.
You ready?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Self-organizing, why isn't team enough? Isn't it enough that the team exists? Does it have to be self-organizing? 2 minutes for Clare.
Isn't team enough? Does it? Oh, right, okay. No, team is not enough. the reason self-organizing is important is because when we are told what to do, first of all, it's stressful, it's distressing, it makes us feel like we are out of control, and that is not a good thing. But second of all, we then just become complacent. We stop even trying. We stop thinking for ourselves because we just wait for somebody else to tell us what to do. It's not effective, and it's not conducive to good mental health or good job satisfaction.
Excellent. And you did that with a minute to spare. That was very good. Okay, and we'll go to Eduardo. 2 minutes.
The same question, right?
Yep, same question.
Yeah, a lot of what Claire shared, but also the self-organizing means that people sort of take agency of what they are doing. So they feel responsibility, they can self-organize, right? So to find ways of addressing the problem that they are facing on their hands, right? So they are not just being told, oh, you do that, and yeah. So I think it ends up doing a lot of the things that Claire is mentioning, which is about people feeling that they are part of this thing they are doing. And that's a human thing, that we want to be part of what we are doing, right? We are also at work. Yeah, I think I'm fine. Yeah.
All right. Vivek, you want to take it?
Yeah. Additionally, I think plus 100 to whatever was being shared on this, teams are not just enough. I think making sure the teams are set up successfully, there's a good organization muscle and support to that team. We are enabling that team to be successful. Do they understand the mission deeply? Do they understand their customer needs deeply? And do they have the right environment to be able to fail and also make the decisions? I think that is also the ecosystem needs to be in place to be able to be successful.
Excellent. Okay, well, that was a little too easy for you. So on the next round, we go down to 1 minute. And I'll bring up a question. Eduardo, you're on first. So the next question is about specialists. Architecture is a complex arena. You need a specialist. It's too expensive to have amateurs mucking about. Your reply?
Nah. Yeah, there is some truth there. Sometimes you have specialists. Sometimes you need someone that knows about something that there are like 5 people in the world to do. So yeah, you need them. But this is not something you need in all of your teams in the organization. So in my view, when we talk about specialists, most of the time, and you talked about the Phoenix project, like those people should help building the systems that are really complex, whatever, but then they should go and help and coach others so they can also do some of that. Because they will be a bottleneck at a given moment. They cannot be everywhere. If like I was talking 100 plus teams, they cannot be on all of those teams. So yeah, that's my answer.
Ooh, the 1 minute constraint's not too bad. And there it is. Okay. So, Vivek.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't add really interesting stuff on this, but I think when you're getting a specialist for an area which is perhaps missing within a team's knowledge context, you are incentivizing that specialist to propagate that specialization and also fill the gaps in that knowledge. I think given the type of architecture we see becoming complex, I think it becomes hard for specialists to own all parts of it. So for me, the elements would be, how do I propagate the knowledge about that specialization in an effective manner so my team is capable to be able to drive the evolution of that architecture.
Nicely done. Okay, and Claire, I believe you did not start that one, so.
I wish to object. Who said we're not allowed to have specialists or architects on our self-organizing teams? Like, first of all, we could have specialists on our teams. Second of all, we could have, according to team topologies, enabling teams of architects who we call in for consultation when we need their expertise. And third of all, when those architects come in, we will learn from them and we will increase our own expertise in architecture. It's not set in stone. We are all learning all the time. So we might have architecture expertise on our team that we are learning from. We might have outside specialists coming in. Yes, it's a specialism, but it doesn't mean it isn't one that we can't get in when we need it and that we can't learn within our own teams as well.
Look at that. To the second. Very good. Okay, now this is going to it gets tougher, guys. So now we're down to the 45-second round, but this comes with a little bit of help. You'll get a few seconds to think about it before we start. Vivek, you'll be first when we start. The question is, or the challenge is, the tragedy of the commons. If a whole team can change the architecture, the short-term needs of feature teams will destroy the shared system structure. Give yourself a few seconds. Think through your answers.
I need to read it again. Yeah, I have completed my thinking. I think the short needs of feature teams will always be there. They're not going to go away. So the architecture aspect here is, how do we make the short-term needs successful within the remits of how we are designing the architecture? So how do we enable the short-term needs? I think every team should be able to change, evolve architecture, again, within the way the structure of that architecture is designed. So again, coming back to the points I think I was sharing around, what are the underlying principles we're optimizing on? What are the constraints against which we're operating?
Oh.
So, yeah, for me, concluding thoughts, whole team should be able to change the architecture, and it should be planned or thought through in terms of how do we make the short-term needs and making those teams successful.
Vivek, proving that this clock is not the boss of us. Claire, are you ready?
Yeah.
Begin.
Systems are always evolving. Features are software. Software is technical. There isn't a division between features and software. Every time we add features, we are potentially going to find ourselves in a situation where we need to change the architecture. We should always be revisiting our designs and our architecture, changing them and evolving them as and when we need to, whether we're adding features or not.
Excellent. Well done. And
I get a minute because Claire.
do you get her leftovers?
15.
I don't know. Go ahead, Eduardo.
Yeah, pretty much with Claire on this one and Vivek. But if we do the opposite of this, we are going to create much more mess. So we are always worried. Oh, we need to deliver these features, so we will not spend time on doing architecture. And then next year we are sort of course correcting a huge mess we did because we didn't spend one day thinking through, and because we had to deliver those 2 features that were asked by someone. So for me, this is a no-go. Yeah. If we don't do that, we will fall in the tragedy of commons, of problems and more problems.
Okay, for this next round, you must answer in the form of a sonnet. No, that's not true.
Absolute
that is
bollocks.
not true. We could go to the one-sentence round just for fun. Do you want to do the one-sentence round? This one would be easy to do one sentence on, I promise.
Depends.
It depends. Are you ready? The next challenge is my career path. If teams produce architecture and designs, what incentive is there for career progression? And I believe we start with Claire.
Yeah. Your career will benefit if you do everything you can to service the needs of the team.
Ooh, good. Well done. I should challenge you more often.
Oh my God.
So, Eduardo, you have the unenviable job of following that. I don't know what you're going to do, but let's hear it.
Me neither. My mind is still... Yeah, I cannot do it.
If I give you 2 sentences, how are you going to do it?
Yeah, I think with maybe 2 I will be there, yeah. No, basically, architecture should be an incentive for teams, so they just do it and feel this is part of their thing, and shouldn't be feeling as this extra thing that someone is doing. Yeah, that's what is on my mind. Not very well articulated, but
it does not seem like it should be a privilege of rank, right?
Exactly.
Okay, Vivek, how are you doing with it?
I think I can do it. I think, for me, I think I want to use the word incentives here.
That was a sentence.
Yeah, I'm starting with the words incentives. So focus on better incentives. Are you working for the career progression? Are you in service of the career progression? And in an idealistic version, challenge the career progression, challenge the career framework. The incentives are misaligned.
We will call that a compound sentence and award a prize.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one, we'll go back to 45 seconds because that was extreme. You did really well.
This was extreme.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a difficult challenge. You did not know you were facing. By the way, I sprung that on them totally. When their faces went blank when I said one sentence, that was for real. Yeah. It's sort of like when Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka, when they first see the room that's all made out of candy, it's just like, authentic. Well, we'll go back to 45 seconds. The next question is about the long view. A valid architecture requires a distance and a high-level view impossible for people in the trenches. And we begin with Eduardo. 45 seconds when you're ready.
I do agree with a lot of that's there, and this is why in the morning I was talking about the idea of the people on the teams learning with people that are working more across teams, and there is more learning and knowledge flowing, and by doing that, those people with the long view, first of all, they are learning what's going on in the trenches and being able to articulate things from multiple trenches. And then the things that come down or come to the teams that are more working on something more local will also help them to do better designs.
All right, thank you. Vivek?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to talk about exactly the same topic tomorrow afternoon.
So you guys got that. That's just a forward reference.
Thank you. I think there's an aspect about the long view, and I think the definition of self-organizing team had aligned on mission, aligned on customer problems, and I think that should allow the long view to emerge. So if I have a self-organizing team, and if they understand the mission and the customer problem they're solving for, the long view should be possible for people working in the trenches, on the ground. So yeah, I think for me, it's somehow rhetorical. Yeah, I would say. So the long view is part on the nature of how our self-organizing team operates.
Excellent. We've heard a number of challenges. Oh, Claire, I knew that was going to happen, and in my heart, I was praying that it wasn't going to be you when it happened. But my prayer was not answered. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
One of my biggest concerns about self-organizing teams is this kind of thing. That they become very insular, they don't pay attention to what's happening in the rest of the organization. I think it happened at late rooms. So in the same way that pairing in and of itself doesn't have to be a positive experience, because pairing can be done well and pairing can be done badly, the same is true of self-organizing teams. One of the pitfalls that they can fall into is that they don't have that wider view and they don't try to find that wider view. But things can be done well and they can be done badly. And when self-organizing teams are done well, then they absolutely are encouraged to think about the wider view, to think about the rest of the organization, and to ask for help.
Lovely. That was worth waiting for. Thank you for stopping. She knows I love her. It's okay. So you've heard this. You've heard the challenges and the answers. Hopefully that's been helpful to you as you go to answer your other questions. But also you've got to know some panelists that you may not have heard from to this degree, and I think that that is valuable. Getting to know these three, I think, is a worthwhile endeavor. So do dive in, get there. I don't know that we have any solid conclusions, but I did think it's a good idea that we have a quick pitch time. You're all doing something. You probably have something you would like to have people call you about or ask you. So we'll just start again with Eduardo and go clockwise. What is it that's going on right now? What do you need? What do you like?
Yeah, so I'm now independent consultant, so doing a lot of things around the things I talked on my keynote this morning. So helping organizations to improve on how they organize their teams, their multiple teams. So not just self-organizing teams, but what's going around them. Helping, looking for better boundaries using different techniques and ideas, team topologies, domain-driven design, all that. And also focusing on helping architecture teams evolve. So how to help architecture teams to realize some other ways of working, and focusing on what Michael Plod was also talking in the morning, becoming more like an enabling team to also help teams to grow. And apart from that, I do some other things, team topologies, like I mentioned, doing a lot of things there. And with Nicktoon, we often do what we call Kickstarter architecture modernization workshops. And this is like organizations that are struggling a bit to do that, sort of understanding where they are and looking for some options. So we come in and try to spend some time on helping understanding.
And they can get hold of you through the various contacts you published.
Yes.
And okay, so you can all find him.
I will also
Vivek?
be sharing all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. As I said in my day job, I'm helping my teams to better understand the practices of evolutionary architecture. And I think Susanne had a great talk today, kind of bringing together domain-driven design, team topologies. For me, it's like the execution version of that slide. I think it's still day one. I'm also writing about my experience, also talking to teams who are going through same challenges. And also on the side, I'm helping new leaders, especially who are navigating change. And if you're moving into leadership role, I'm guiding them through their journey. I think the first 100 days are always tough. And I'm reaching out either through a coaching activity or also through my personal agency, trying to help and connect to the community around helping them. For me, I think there's a lot of, I would say less preparation that we throw leaders into dealing with this ecosystem of driving evolutionary architecture, thinking about change, while they are trying to just understand their role. So I think for new leaders, it's even tough. So I'm kind of working on that as well.
Good. Claire, what do you have that you can pitch?
I'm really glad you asked, because when we did our intros at the start, you said, and she's available at the end, and it took a few seconds to register what you'd said. I was like, oh no, was that my chance? I missed it. So I am actively looking for new clients. I guess there's kind of three main things that I do. I do this, I speak at events, and I love it, if you can't tell. So if you're running internal events, I can come and keynote at your events, and that's something I do quite a lot of, and I really enjoy it. The other thing is that I am not just a technical coach, I'm a Saman technical coach. So if you haven't come across it, the Saman Technical Coaching Society is run by Emily Bache. She's written an amazing book about Saman technical coaching. I am an official member of the board of the Saman Technical Coaching Society, and we have a very structured way of working working with teams to help them to improve their software development practices. So we work with them as ensembles, we teach them particular techniques, we focus on XP practices particularly, and we do hands-on work with those teams where we'll work as an ensemble on their actual code base. To strengthen the tools that they have at their disposal, because typically developers aren't taught this stuff and they need somebody experienced to help them with it. So that's the second thing I do. The third thing I do is I also work at a higher level, so that's with developers, and that's kind of my bread and butter, but I also do work with engineering managers and technical leaders and CTOs on helping them to understand software development practice, to understand things like continuous integration and continuous deployment, and why it matters, and why it makes a difference, and why they should be helping their teams to get good at this stuff, and why they should think that it's important. In fact, Kevlin Henny and I have been working with a bank recently with their executives on exactly that. So that's the other thing that I do. So, and like I said, I'm looking for clients, don't be shy. I've only been independent for 18 months, so I am still kind of, still building up that momentum. So I'm very, very happy to talk to people who might think that they might be able to use me in a good way.
Of course, as your moderator, I feel that it would be self-aggrandizing and perhaps inappropriate for me to pitch any of my things, so for that, I'll just leave the stage. Thank you.
He does good
Well,
stuff too.
Thank you so much, and please stay on the stage for a little while. Tim, just come up on stage again. And as I mentioned earlier, Tim just recently moved to Scotland.
That's right.
So I guess you'll be available in Europe as well, right?
That's right. I'll be serving UK, Europe. I know they're same geographically, and probably most of Asia. So I'd be happy to hear from you all.
And you know how to reach these people. So once again, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Eduardo. It's been a great panel. Thanks.